Hello, everyone. Ivan Jalakov asked me to talk about the impact of the current war in Ukraine on the European integration process. In the past, I've worked on this topic with a whole set of historians, and we wrote a new history of Europe called Making Europe. And in this project and the books we published, we used the concept of the hidden integration of Europe. So why are we using this concept, and what does it mean for current times? Well, we have to travel back first to the 19th century. In the 19th century, nation states, emerging nation states, also wanted to connect through trade, through knowledge, through infrastructures. These connections then were seen as mechanisms also to prevent war in Europe and in the world, in fact. Because the basic idea was that if you trade and if you connect and can see each other in the eyes, people would not go to war. At the end of the 19th century, a number of people also proclaimed the end of war or the illusion of war, because man would never do that again. It was not rational, because it would really hurt the economy, and it didn't make sense anymore. But of course, what happened in the 20th century, we first had the First World War. So this philosophy that when you connect people, they will not go to war proved wrong in the First World War. Yet, after the First World War, this was not the conclusion that was drawn. The conclusion was we need to improve. We need to build more international organizations, more connections. And this led to the League of Nations. The League of Nations developed a very specific philosophy on how to connect. This is what I call technocratic internationalism. And it meant that working committees of experts would agree on how to connect through technical means. So there was a focus on mobility, on energy, on healthcare, for example, within the League, and try to develop what we now may call common policies. At the same time, the League had a political arm aimed at preventing war. The conclusion of many historians is nowadays that the political arm of the League of Nations may have been a failure. The technical arm was quite successful. After the Second World War, two new international platforms or organizations were created, more than two, but the two I want to mention, one is the UN, but the other is the European Union or its predecessors, the coal and steel community, for example, where it all started. And this coal and steel community was built on this idea of hidden integration and technocratic internationalism. So basically it means if you unite people, as it was called in the Schuman plan, materially, they would not go to war. So again, this idea surfaced, what you also may call the myth of the network, which is war will not happen if countries build a common basis, a common set of policies. Well, the EU has been successful to some extent along two axes. One axis was what you may call widening. enlargement, and the other axis is deepening. But there was always a trade-off between the two, because the widening was often applied to technical areas, agricultural, the cohesion fund, structural funds, infrastructures, and also like the Erasmus program, knowledge exchange, the deepening of the EU, which refers more to the political arm of the EU, was difficult because over time, as there was more push towards political unification, there was always also more resistance against it. And this is how we entered the 21st century, with this resistance and this point that the EU was called a non-democratic institution, and rightly so, in fact, because many decisions in Brussels are taken through technical processes, and the people could not really relate to the EU. So to some extent, the process, became stalled. It looked like, certainly also after Brexit, there was no future for the EU anymore, no bigger future. The original vision seemed to be in problem. Yet, of course, the EU was still pushing. Well, if we now look from this perspective at what's happening in Ukraine and this war, I think the outcome could be that the political unification of the EU will be strengthened, because it becomes very clear that the normal state-like features of the EU are very weak. There's no common defense policy, or hardly any. There's no common foreign policy. All of these kind of important state-like areas are not covered by the EU. Why not? Again, because it was designed as a technical organization that would have spillovers into the political sphere, but this spillover never really happened. So what the war could do, it could push Europe further along this deepening axis, so that all the countries in the EU, or even a subset, may decide to politically unite more, and so build up a common defense, a much stronger common defense, and a common foreign policy. If this happens, it will go at the expense of the widening. So it will be very difficult for countries like Ukraine, also in the future, and also for Turkey, to enter the EU. Of course, a state can still have all type of relationships. A super state, the EU, can still have all kind of relationships with the Ukraine, but Ukraine will not become part of the EU then. It may also lead to a further weakening if the conclusion is that states themselves need to build up their capacity for war. Like in Germany, they've now made the decision to build up an army. But if you look at the history of nation-state formation, it's very clear that wars have been instrumental and very important for building nation states. And this I think this may be the most likely outcome of this war. Thank you.